And President Trump's border czar tells ABC News his focus is on public safety threats and national security threats. But Tom Oman also says if you're in the country illegally, you're not off the table.
Look, I'm looking at the numbers this morning. We're about 14,000 arrests, and about 76% of them are criminals. That's a target of the operation, right? But where the collateral arrests happen when we're looking for the bad guy, and we find others with them. And we have told ICE officers they're going to enforce the law. Unlike the last administration, we're not telling ICE agents, ignore the oath you took, ignore the immigration law. Your immigration officers enforce those laws.
And let's bring in immigration lawyer Leon Fresco for more on that. Leon, thanks for coming on. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says, in the administration's view, all undocumented immigrants are criminals because they broke our nation's laws by coming into this country. A 2023 congressional report estimates about 42% of undocumented immigrants entered the country legally but overstayed their period of admission. So what does the law say? Does it matter whether immigrants cross into the country illegally or enter legally but then overstay a legal visa?
Absolutely. That's a huge difference in terms of whether you actually want to label someone as having committed a crime or not. So the person who entered the United States without inspection, that person did actually break a criminal statute that prohibits, it's a misdemeanor statute that prohibits entry without inspection. A person who entered lawfully with a visa and overstayed is now here without lawful presence in the United States, but hasn't committed a crime. There have been numerous congressional efforts in the past 20 years to try to make that a crime, but none of them have passed. So at this moment, calling that set of people criminals would be inaccurate. Whereas if you wanted to theoretically call the people who crossed the border unlawfully criminals, you at least can say they violated a criminal statute.
Now, an unpublished notice in the Federal Register shows the Trump administration may end deportation protections for nearly 350,000 Venezuelan immigrants under temporary protected status right now. What impact would that have?
That's going to have a dramatic impact on the United States. Those are 350,000 people that are here, that are working, that are doing all kinds of essential jobs. And so there will be disruptions if those people lose their work permit and their status. I think as a practical matter, you're going to see a lot of those people, either they already had pending asylum applications that they then had dismissed without prejudice, so they will just restart those asylum proceedings. And so as a practical matter, very few of those people will be people that will be able to be instantly removed from the United States, because you're just going to actually be adding them onto an overly backlogged asylum and immigration court system that has millions of cases already pending. The temporary protected status had reduce that burden on the caseload, but now that's just going to be adding to the burden. So it will add to the list of people potentially deportable, but as a practical matter, many of those people will not be deported for many years because they'll have to have their asylum claim heard now.
So what's your biggest concern with the deportation operations underway right now?
Well, the biggest concern is, are there going to be people that are going to be apprehended that aren't part of this larger group of people that I think most Americans would say, look, if somebody's here and they're a violent criminal, or they're someone, they've had their due process, they actually have an order of removal and they've avoided leaving like they were supposed to with the order of removal, those are the individuals that people can understand why, if you're going to have an immigration system that actually has a book full of legal ways to enter the country and a book full of illegal things you cannot do as a foreign national, none of those books matter if you don't enforce the law. So everybody gets that. But when you have people who have come dependent on certain statuses that the United States have given them, and you start canceling those statuses and creating upheaval in those situations, that's where I think people are going to start to say, hey, maybe are we going too far? And that's going to be the interesting thing to monitor.
And what rights do these people have once they are in custody?
Well, if you're in custody, it depends why you're in custody. If you're in custody because you violated one of the criminal statutes, it's actually a very few rights. You're subject to mandatory detention, and you have almost no way to avoid removal unless you can show you're likely to be tortured in the country that we're trying to send you back to. So that's one group. But if you're just in a group of people who is never committed a crime and you're here, you overstayed your visa, you get apprehended, you can ask for a bond hearing to be removed from detention because you're not violent or any risk of harming of anybody, but then you're going to have to make a defense for why you're not subject to deportation. And very few people have that unless they can either show that they have some fear of returning to their country or they've built some other defense for deportation that are very rare.
All right, immigration attorney Leon Fresco, we appreciate your time today. Leon, thank you.
Thank you.